Am I smarter or the smartest? In this video lesson, we will cover when to use comparative and when to use superlative forms of adjectives and adverbs. After a quick but thorough practice session, we will try a quick test to see how well you have learned the degrees of adjective and adverb recognition. Let's begin. A degree item on an objective test might look like this. Roxanne is the blank member of her family. Which choice fills the blank with the correct form of smart? Is it A, smartest, B, most smartest, C, more smart, or D, least smartest? Letter A, smartest, is the correct superlative form. So what are comparative and superlative forms? Let's start with comparative. These forms include ER adjectives and the words better, worse, more, and less. You're going to want to use these comparative forms with just two items because you're making a comparison. Let's try a sentence. Between those two friends, Yolanda is tallest. But wait, there's only two, so we're not going to use the tallest. We want to use ER. Between those two friends, Yolanda is taller. The superlative forms. These forms include EST adjectives and the words best, worst, most, and least. You're going to want to use these with three or more items in your sentence. Let's try. Of all her friends, Yolanda is more gregarious. We have three or more here though, so we need to use most. Of all her friends, Yolanda is the most gregarious. You do not want to use a double comparative or a superlative. You're going to give a redundant feeling to your sentence. We saw that Thomas made an A on the difficult test. He is the most happiest student in Professor Orsini's class. You can use one or the other, but you shouldn't be using both together. For example, we saw that Thomas made an A on the difficult test. He is the happiest student in Professor Orsini's class. So your EST adjective here would be correct. You can also use the word most and just keep the word happy. He is the most happy student in Professor Orsini's class. You should know the correct forms. One-syllable words usually take ER or EST, such as nice, nicer, and nicest. Unfortunately, there's some variables with two-syllable words. Sometimes you're just going to use the ER and EST, such as lazier, but sometimes you're going to use the superlatives such as more handsome. Now, words with three or more syllables definitely use more, most, less, and least. For example, more interesting or least interesting. We have come to our quick test. If you'd like, you can go back to the beginning of this video and review and strengthen your degrees of modifiers on adjectives and adverbs before you take this test. Or you can also look at this quick test in its PDF form. Otherwise, if you're ready, let's begin your quick test. Now, in the items that follow, choose the option that corrects an error in the underlined portion. If no error exists, you'll choose letter D, no change is necessary. Item 1. My standard poodle Jack is the biggest of my two dogs. Should we change biggest to A, bigger, B, more bigger, C, most big, or D, biggest is correct and no change is necessary? You only have two dogs being described in this sentence, so letter A, bigger, would be the correct choice. Item 2. Joseph's parents have 3 sons. Joseph is the most daring, while Jason is the more cautious of the 3. Should we change more cautious to A, cautiouser, B, more cautiouser, C, most cautious, or D, more cautious is correct and no change is necessary? You have 3 sons in this sentence, therefore letter C, most cautious, would be the correct. It also matches the most daring in the previous part of the sentence. Item 3. Raphael, our new roommate, is lazy. Of the truckload of boxes, Chuck and I had to carry the heavier ones. Should we change heavier with A, heaviest, B, more heavy, C, more heavier, or D, heavier is correct and no change is necessary? Heaviest would be correct. We're talking of an entire truckload of boxes. Certainly there are 3 or more. Item 4. Professor Zuromsky read my essay in front of the entire class. Obviously, I am the better writer among her many students. Is the word better exchanged with A, best, B, most great, C, greater, or D, better is good and no change is necessary? Because you're talking about the entire class, we can assume there are 3 or more people involved. Therefore, the letter A, best, would be the best answer here. On part 2 of your quick test, in the items that follow, you should choose the word or phrase that best completes the sentence. Item 5. Roxanne can frost cupcakes than anyone else in the cake decorating class. Should you fill in the blank with letter A, quickest, letter B, more quickly, letter C, most quickly, or letter D, quicker? Anyone else in the class sounds like there are 3 or more there. Therefore, more quickly would probably work here in this situation. Item 6. Of all our friends, Thomas is the blank person we know. Should you fill in the blank with letter A, more sad, B, sadder, C, saddest, or D, most saddest? Saddest would work best in this situation. With the word all for all our friends, we're assuming there are 3 or more people. Item 7. No one drives blank than Grandmother Ruth. Is it A, slowest, B, more slowest, C, more slower, or D, more slowly? More slowly would work here in this situation. We're talking about Grandmother Ruth and making a comparison. Item 8. Cameron spent 4 hours cleaning our tiny apartment. Now he is blank than he was when the place was a pigsty. Should we fill in the blank with letter A, less grouchy, letter B, less grouchier, letter C, grouchyless, or letter D, the least grouchy? Less grouchy would be best spent here. We're talking just about Cameron. Item 9. David smiled and bowed. Glenn offered a single red rose. and Fred farted and picked his nose. Of the three of us, poor Cheryl certainly has the blank date. Should you fill in the blank with letter A, worse, letter B, more worse, letter C, worst, or letter D, more terrible? There are three gentlemen here, although Fred probably isn't being a gentleman at this point. Therefore, you're going to be using the word worst. Letter C is the best choice. Item 10. After Mrs. McKnight found 44 errors in his last essay, Albert decided to proofread his next paper. Is it letter A, slower, B, more carefully, C, most carefully, or D, carefuler? More carefully would be the best choice here. We're comparing his last essay to his next paper. You've made it to the end of your degrees of adjective and adverb modifiers video. If you'd like, go back and review this video as often as you like to refresh and review the skills that you've learned. Don't forget, you have a PDF of the quick test of degrees of modifiers of adjectives and adverbs that will also help you refresh your skills.